My name is Jeremy Krovitz, and today I'm going to talk about the hospital management system project that I created in Java. I initially did this project for a graduate school course that I was taking at the University of St. Thomas called Foundations of Software Development in Java. We were given the initial code for the program, and however, the data was transient, meaning that it would disappear when we'd run it. It wouldn't stay in the program. So our job was to add CSV files for each of the entities within the program. So there are doctors, patients, staff, medicine, facilities, and labs. So we'd add a CSV file for each of these entities, and we'd make it so that we could add to the file and that we could read from the file. So following the completion of this class, I decided to enhance the project and make it so that each of the entities could be written to a database. And I also further enhanced it so that they'd also be able to be, each entity could be deleted or it could be updated as well, which was not part of the original project. So I'm going to go ahead and give a demo. So we will pull up the database. I'll type in Postgres. Postgres. So let's see. So now we can actually list, if we list our tables, we'll see doctor, facility, lab, medicine, patient, and staff. But then now I'm actually going to delete each of those tables so that we can see each of the tables being recreated in our Java project. So now we can do drop table doctor, drop table patient, drop table staff, drop table medicine, drop table facility, drop table lab. And then we can commit that. And then we can look and see if we have any tables and did not find any relations. And so now if we go into our Java program, if we run it, and so that little delay is actually the tables for each of the doctors, patients, medicine, laboratories, facilities, and staff being created. We can actually check that our tables are there. We can now do DT and look, there are the tables. So now what we can do is we can actually use Java to then, we can insert into the database, we can insert doctors. So we can click 1 to add a new entry. We can choose the doctor's ID, the doctor's name, we'll say Dr. G, specialist, we'll say ENT, doctor qualifications, we'll say MD, appointment times, let's say 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., doctor room number, let's say 12, and then now we can click back, and we can list the doctors. So as you can see, there's the doctor that we just entered, and let's say we wanted to change the doctor's appointment time, so we can hit back, and we can type in 3 to update the doctor. We can enter B to change the doctor's appointment times, and then what is the ID that corresponds with the doctor that you want to update, and we want to update Dr. 1. And then what would you like to update the doctor's appointment times to? And let's say 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we'll hit 1 to go back, and then we'll do 2 to show the existing doctors list. And then as we can see, there's our new appointment times. And then let's say we didn't want this doctor in our system anymore. We can click back, and then we can click, or we can type in 4 to delete doctor, and then which doctor ID should be deleted, and we'll say 1, and then we can hit 1 again to return back, and then we can do 2 to list the doctors, and as we can see, since we deleted the doctors, now there aren't any more. And then let's see, I'll demonstrate with another entity. I'm just gonna press 0 to go back to the main menu. Let's do 6 for our staff, and let's do A for nurses to enter a new nurse. We'll do 1 for new entry. Let's give the nurse an ID of 1. We'll give the staff name Jen. We'll say gender female, and we'll give her 50,000 for a salary. We'll type 1 to go back, and then 2, we can list the nurse. So there's Jen, and let's say we wanted to update the nurse. We can go back, we can update the nurse. Let's say we wanted to change the nurse's salary. We'll type C to change the salary, which is the ID that corresponds with the nurse that you want to update. So we'll say 1. And then what would you like to change the nurse's salary to? We'll be generous. We'll say 70,000. And then we can hit 1 to go back. And we can view the existing nurses list. And as we can see, we have that updated salary right there. So now I'm going to show parts of the coding that I've done to create this program. So now, this is the main class right here, hospital management system. We have several functions within this, within main. And so there's welcome, display calendar, create tables, and choose entities. So welcome actually it just sets up this welcome to hospital management system project in Java. And then we display this calendar right here, and we actually use arrays to output the month and the day, the full month and the day, as well as we use the calendar class. So that outputs the date and the time. And then this is where we initialize new objects of each entity type. And then we call each of the functions to create the table of the particular entity. And then this choose entities, this is actually where creating that main menu where you choose to either doctor, patient, medicine lab, facility, or staff. And then let's say, so if we decided doctor, then this doctor option function would be called, and then it would go down to this function, doctor option, and it would take in a choice, and then it would, and based on that choice, it would then select either case 1, case 2, case 3, or case 4 from this switch statement to decide whether to insert a doctor, to get a doctor, choose doctor update, or to delete doctor. And then let's say for the insert doctor, if let me open up the show view, we want Project Explorer, you can go into hospital management system, and then we can find doctor, and then so here's the doctor class, and so this is actually, so this method, our function create a doctor table, this is where this actually calls the super class, and it creates this doctor table. So then if the superclass is database, so if we go into database, we can see that this create table is where the table is actually being created. So the doctor table is actually passed in as a string. And so it's actually the string is right here where the table's actually being created. And so back in our doctor's class, let's say, so then when we actually insert the doctor, so this is that insert statement, and then we create a new database object, and a new instance of the database class, and then we connect to the database, and then we set each of these, so we set like int, set string, depending on what type is entered, in the console. And so it actually, so get did actually will get this, the ID from the get did function. It will get the did that's returned based on the user's input. And similarly for get dname, get specialist, get appoint, get .qual, get droom, and then if we wanted to list the doctors, then that doctor option function, so this would then, when case 2 is selected, it would call this get doctor. And so right here is that SQL string, and then we have our database. We're connecting to the database, we're creating a statement, and we're actually then executing the query, and then we're calling display doctor and passing in the result set that we get from executing the query. And then so this display doctor actually then displays the output in a way that, so that in a neat formatting. And then let's say then if we wanted to delete the doctor, that would be case 4. And so it would call the superclass, and it would pass in doctor as the entity to delete, and then it would pass in that SQL statement delete from doctor where did, and then the question mark is the ID that would be passed in. And then in database, we have this delete entity, which takes in the entity in the SQL string. And that's where all this happens, where this delete action happens, where it sets it takes in that ID, like it sets it, and then it makes that update, or it makes that deletion rather. And then also, so if we wanted to update the doctor, then the doctor option would the doctor option within hospital management system would call this choose doctor update, which is in the doctor class. And then this choose doctor update would then give the prompt of and asking what kind of update to make to the doctor. And then there's this switch statement. And so for one of the super methods, or one of the super classes methods that gets called is get ID of entity to update, and we pass in that entity, so that's doctor. And so what that does then in the database is that it actually says like what is the ID that corresponds with the entity. Well, it would fill in the entity, so doctor, that you would like to update, and then it actually returns that the integer of the ID, and then back in doctor. So then it says, well, what would you like to change the doctor's name to? And then um, and then we have this string where the doctor's name is passed in as well as its ID, and then that gets passed in to this update entity function, which is called on the superclass. And then for update entity, um, then all of these are passed in. So we have like the prompt, we have the sequel, we have what update, and we have the entity ID. Oh, and we also have update selection integer. So update selection is if the update is going to be updating a string value, and then the update selection integer is if we're going to be updating an int value. And so if an int value is what's going to be updated, then we just pass in an empty string. But if a string value is what's going to be updated, then we would pass in a null for integer. And then so for if update selection is not equal to the empty string, so that's if we are updating a string value, then it will make that, it'll get that input, and then it will update the selection here. And then if the update selection integer is not null, so that's if we want to update an int value, we have to actually cast the integer to an int, and then we can make that update, because we can't have a null value of type int, it has to be a null value of type integer. So then we actually make this update right here, where we actually set the integer value, and we set the integer of the entity that needs to be updated. We set that integer value. So if we're updating the nurse's set or the doctor's room, that's what would that's where that would happen. So in the future, there's a lot that I could add. I'd like to add something so if someone enters in a string when it should be an integer that's updated, it would say to the user, an integer value must be entered. I'd also like to eventually add a GUI. In my Java class, we didn't have time to do Java FX, but I've started learning actually some Java FX, because eventually I would like to translate this program and use a GUI for it. So if I go actually to, well, so far I've got this hello Java FX test, and so right now I just have this basic program that I've been working on. So if we have if we push and it's a doctor, then we could then select either add doctor or list doctor. This is just my main testing. And then if we pushed again, and then we could, this is what would allow us to enter different things here. Right now, this is just in the very, very basic phases, but eventually I would like to create a GUI. And then also there are endless possibilities of things that could be added, different parts of the hospital, etc. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video.